Hey everyone, and welcome back. I love getting those news stacks, and wow, you guys really outdid yourselves this time. September 2024 was a whirlwind for Indian fintech.
It really was, yeah. It's incredible to see the amount of innovation happening and not just like small changes here and there. This is like a fundamental shift in how India interacts with finance.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's what I wanted to dive into first. One of the first things that jumped out at me going through all this was how fintech is becoming a part of everyday life in India. Like, it's not just something for people in big cities who are really into tech anymore, you
Yeah,
know?
right. You bring up a really good point. Like, look at Star Health and Allied Insurance. They're partnering with NEE to offer insurance policies in Braille. So that's fintech, but with like a social impact, making important information accessible to people who are visually impaired.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great example of how we can use tech to be more inclusive. And then there's Aditya Birla Capital experimenting with health scans using selfies. Imagine being able to check your vitals just using your phone's camera. Makes you wonder, could this be the future of preventative healthcare?
It's definitely interesting, and it speaks to a larger trend we're seeing, the explosion of data and how companies are figuring out all these innovative ways to use it, like Razorpay, for example. They're using all the payment data they have to help businesses make smarter decisions.
Yeah, makes sense. Data is the new gold, or so they say. And speaking of gold, one report predicts that UPI-linked credit lines, or CLOUs, could be a trillion-dollar opportunity for banks by 2030. Trillion, with a T. So CLEUs, for those who don't know, basically let people access credit through their UPI accounts, which could make credit accessible to millions more people. It's predicted to be huge. And Zeta, the company that made the prediction, is already partnering with HDFC Bank to make it happen.
Yeah, that's a brilliant move. UPI is everywhere in India now, with millions of people using it for their everyday transactions. So by connecting credit lines to this existing network, they're tapping into a huge potential market and making financial services available to so many more people.
That's a lot of sense. And it's not just private companies. The government is also playing a key role in this whole fintech surge. I was really struck by the changes to the securities contracts regulation rules.
Oh, yeah. Those changes are huge. Basically, they're making it easier for companies in India to be listed on international exchanges, which means they're opening the doors for tons of foreign investment, which could be a big boost for the entire fintech scene.
For sure. It's like they're sending a clear message to the world. India is open for business. But it's not just about attracting foreign investment, right? They're also focused on making finance more accessible within India itself. The new UPI ICD facility from the RBI is a perfect example of that.
Definitely. With that facility, anyone can go to any ATM and put cash directly into their bank account using just their phone and UPI app. No need for a debit card. It's a game changer for people in rural areas or those who are new to banking and haven't used those systems before.
So much for needing to find your debit card at the bottom of your bag. Seems like everywhere we look, there's some new initiative or innovation in Indian fintech. Another one that caught my eye was SEBI's decision to lower the minimum investment for bonds to just 10,000 rupees.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. That's a major step towards making investing more accessible in India. Now people, even those with limited funds, can diversify their investments and maybe get higher returns. It's all about breaking down the barriers that used to prevent regular people from investing.
It's a really exciting time to be following Indian fintech.
Yeah.
You got big players like HDFC and SBI innovating like crazy, and then a whole wave of dynamic startups like MoneyView, which just hit unicorn status.
And don't forget about companies like Credible, who are really shaking things up in the lending space. Their revolving short-term loans are specifically designed to give small businesses fast access to the credit they need to grow.
Absolutely. We've only scratched the surface here, but it's clear that India's fintech revolution is impacting everything, from how people make everyday transactions to their access to credit, healthcare, and even investment opportunities. And the innovation we're seeing, it's not just limited to like the big apps and services, right?
Yeah.
Even traditional banking is getting a pretty serious fintech makeover.
For sure, for sure. And it's interesting to see how public and private sector players are like coming together in this space. One example that comes to mind is ESAF Small Finance Bank. They teamed up with NPCI to launch this Inori Rupee Platinum credit card.
Inori, huh? Like wish in Japanese.
Yeah.
Catchy name. But what I thought was really interesting about this was seeing a small finance bank partner with the National Payments Corporation of India. It shows how these collaborations are kind of blurring the lines between traditional finance and the faster-moving world of fintech.
Totally. It's like good for everyone involved, you know?
Yeah.
The smaller banks get access to the latest tech and a wider customer base. And the established players like NPCI, they get to tap into new markets and demographics. Speaking of NPCI, by the way, their collaboration with Hitachi Payment Services to launch that Android-based cash recycling ATM, the HPDX BU01, total game changer.
No kidding.
Huh.
Imagine going up to an ATM and not only being able to deposit cash, but also open an account, apply for a loan, maybe even buy insurance, all through a touchscreen.
Right. It's all about making the financial system work better for everyone. And as long as we're talking about making things better, we can't forget about security in this whole digital age.
You're right, especially with all the cybercrime going around. Which reminds me, MasterCard launching their payment passkey service globally with those pilot programs in India, with Pay and Razorpay. That's a good step in the right direction. Imagine no more passwords or OTPs, just using biometrics for all your online shopping, like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it's the future of secure transactions for sure. And it's happening now. Remember that NCRB report we were looking at? It said that Indians lost over 7,000 crore rupees to cybercrime just last year. Small and medium businesses are especially vulnerable. That's why it's so great that Unsurity is partnering with DBS Bank India to offer that CyberSure plan.
Absolutely. And the fact that DBS Bank is covering the first month's cost for 10,000 businesses is huge. It's a good reminder that while all this innovation is great, we also need to make sure these new systems are secure. For sure.
But let's shift gears a bit from the micro to the macro. You had flagged a few reports about India's overall economic performance in September. Right. The State Bank of India's EcoWrap report, they initially projected GDP growth between 7% and 7.1% for the first quarter of this fiscal year, 2024-25. But the official figures from the National Statistical Office came in a little lower at 6.7%.
Still, given the global economic slowdown we're seeing, 6.7% isn't bad at all. Shows India's economic resilience.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that this growth is coming from both the industrial sector, with construction and manufacturing doing well, and the services sector, which is booming. So it's a more balanced, sustainable kind of growth.
And those record GST collections, a massive 2.1 lakh crore rupees in April, and a solid 10% year-on-year increase in August, reaching 1.74 lakh crore. It seems like the government's efforts to get people paying their taxes and bring more of the economy into the formal sector are working.
Seems like it. This steady growth in GST collections is a good sign for long-term economic stability. And of course, for the government's revenue. But we can't talk about economics without mentioning inflation, right?
True. At least there's good news for consumers. The wholesale price index-based inflation cooled down to a 4-month low of 1.31% in August, mostly because of falling food and manufactured product prices.
That's good news, especially for people who are feeling the pinch of those rising costs of living. But we shouldn't get too excited just yet. Global factors like supply chain problems and volatile energy prices could still push inflation back up.
The RBI's monetary policy decisions will be important to watch. Speaking of the RBI, they're not just thinking about inflation. They're also working on making the financial sector run more smoothly. The launch of Davasuchak, their new online claim tracker, is a good example.
Davasuchak. Claim tracker. I love it. It's such a straightforward name. That tool is going to make it so much easier for people to track the status of their claims, especially if a bank fails. It's all about transparency and building trust in the banking system.
Giving people more control. And speaking of which, small finance banks like Suryodaya SFB are really stepping up. They're partnering with fintech players like Taraki and Blossom.
Those are really interesting partnerships. So Suryodaya SFB is offering these new digital fixed deposit products through Taraki, and they're using Blossom to streamline how new customers sign up. It really shows how collaboration is driving the fintech revolution in India.
Collaboration is key. We see it everywhere, right? Like PayU teaming up with Amazon Pay Later to offer instant credit to shoppers, and their partnership with South Indian Bank for that Flash Pay biometric authentication system. It's all about creating a seamless, integrated experience for the customer.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget about PhonePe partnering with Singapore's Liquid Group. Now Indian travelers can use UPI to pay at stores all over Singapore. It's a sign that UPI is becoming more and more recognized globally. But it's not just the private sector leading the charge. The government is also playing a crucial role.
Absolutely. The Ministry of Finance relaxing the rules for big infrastructure spending is a clear signal to investors. And then making the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, NAMBI-FI for short, a public financial institution. It's clear they're serious about upgrading the country's infrastructure.
Yeah, And they're not forgetting about people either. The SBI Foundation's ASHA Scholarship Program is a great example. They're supporting 10,000 talented students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Because having access to good education is essential for innovation and building a skilled workforce.
It's encouraging to see these investments in India's future, both in physical infrastructure and in people. We've covered a lot here, from big-picture economic indicators and policy changes to innovative new products and partnerships. And it's clear that the lines between traditional finance and fintech are becoming blurred, creating this really dynamic and rapidly changing landscape. It's really amazing to see how all of this is touching so many parts of daily life in India.
For sure, for sure.
Like, did you see the news about Bank of Baroda launching that travel debit card with easemytrip.com?
Yeah, it's a smart move, and it says a lot about how banking is changing.
How so?
Well, we usually see private banks being quicker to jump on these kinds of partnerships. So it's interesting that a public sector bank like Bank of Baroda is leading the way here.
Yeah, I get you.
It shows that even the more traditional institutions recognize they need to adapt, and leverage what fintech brings to the table.
Totally. It's like they're saying, hey, we might be a public bank, but we can still be pretty agile.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of public sector banks leading the way, Union Bank of India made headlines by signing that partnership for carbon accounting financials.
Right.
They're the first big Indian bank to do that, yeah.
Yeah, they are. And it's a big deal. It shows that they're serious about taking climate change into account.
It's good to see these big institutions realizing that sustainability isn't just about doing the right thing, it's also good for business. Definitely. Investors are paying more attention to environmental factors than ever before. Banks that don't keep up with that are going to get left behind.
No doubt about it. Now, moving on from the environment to something a bit more, well, luxurious. IDFC First Bank launched 2 new premium credit cards, Ashfa and Mayura, both focused on travel perks.
Oh, yeah. Those are nice.
Those names, by the way, from Indian mythology, right?
I think so.
Pretty clever branding.
Yeah, for sure. It gives them a unique identity.
And they're offering some pretty generous refunds for canceled flights and hotels.
Which is a big deal these days, with travel being so unpredictable.
Right, it makes a lot of sense. They're clearly targeting those travelers who value flexibility and who want peace of mind when they're booking trips. Of course, not everyone is jet-setting around the world, and SBI is definitely catering to the everyday commuter. They've rolled out that new MTS card, which is the first of its kind in India, and they've got that app to manage prepaid cards, plus a redesigned FASTag for quicker toll payments.
Yeah, it's all about making those daily journeys smoother.
Exactly. And for those with connections abroad, the RBI clarified that overseas citizen of India cardholders are now eligible for education loans to study overseas.
I saw that. That's huge.
Right. It could be a game changer for a lot of people. Speaking of smart moves, Bank of Baroda is really embracing AI. They've launched 3 new AI-powered solutions: a virtual relationship manager, a knowledge management platform, and a chatbot to handle customer questions.
It's a great example of how AI is changing how banks operate. From customer service to behind-the-scenes stuff, it's all about efficiency, improving the customer experience, and staying ahead of the game in this fast-paced industry.
And LIC, the insurance giant, they're going digital too, partnering with Infosys to develop a new platform. It seems like no one can ignore this shift to digital, especially with more and more young people entering the market.
For sure, they have to adapt. It's all about staying relevant and meeting the expectations of these new customers.
And let's not forget about data. All this innovation is underpinned by data. Razorpay's Data Sync platform is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It lets businesses bring together all their financial data and really understand what's going on.
It's essential in this world of real-time transactions.
Exactly. And speaking of real-time transactions, did you know that almost half of all real-time transactions globally last year happened in India? That's according to ACI Worldwide.
Wow, that's incredible.
It just goes to show how big and how fast India's digital payment system is growing. It's not just about catching up anymore. India is setting the pace. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Indian fintech, one thing is crystal clear. This is a revolution that's still in full swing, full of opportunities, challenges, successes, and disruptions.
Absolutely.
We've seen how it's impacting everything, from how people get around to global investments, from financial inclusion to tackling climate change.
It's a dynamic landscape, constantly changing. It requires everyone, from the big players to the startups, to be adaptable, innovative, and most importantly, focused on the user.
Couldn't agree more. So as you navigate this exciting world, we hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and insights you need, whether it's to make informed decisions, seize new opportunities, or even be a part of shaping the future of finance in India. Until next time, happy exploring.